I didn't plan to be here, standing on this old bridge just as the sun tilted over the horizon, painting the river gold, but the moment I saw her, all plans collapsed. She was leaning against the railing, hair catching the light, the kind of light that made every shadow on her face matter. She hadn't changed much, maybe just a little more grace, a little less edge, but something about her made the air hum differently. "Don't be afraid," she said, and for a fraction of a second, I thought she meant the bridge. Then she smiled, and I realized she meant me. Her presence hit like warm water, like walking into a room that smells faintly of rain and jasmine. The way she shifted her weight, letting her fingers brush the railing, made the space between us feel alive, electric. I wanted to step closer, but my feet seemed glued to the wooden boards beneath me. I swallowed. I wasn't sure you'd. My voice trailed, caught somewhere between reverence and nerves. She tilted her head, observing me with those quiet, knowing eyes that had once guided me through lessons I didn't know I needed. "Been waiting," she repeated softly, almost to herself, almost teasing, almost a question. The bridge was empty, the water below moving without sound. A stray gust tossed her hair across her face, and I caught the tiniest moment of vulnerability before she tucked it back behind her ear. My hand twitched, and I didn't know whether to reach for her, for the railing, or just freeze in place. My pulse seemed loud enough that she might hear it if she leaned closer. "You look different," I said, voice low, not wanting the words to carry too far. I wasn't thinking about how she looked, exactly. Her clothes were simple, a coat draped casually, the scarf sliding down her shoulder, but about how she existed in this space, fully, quietly, and somehow, impossibly, just for me. She laughed, soft and deliberate, a sound that made the river feel still. "Different how?" "Like, I don't know. Like you're waiting for someone you shouldn't, and still, here." My words hung awkwardly, my confidence collapsing in real time. She only smiled, eyes holding mine for too long, like she knew exactly what I couldn't say. The moment stretched, our hands nearly touched when I leaned forward, the faintest brush of her sleeve against my wrist sending heat shooting up my arm. I wanted to stay in that inch of space forever, wanted her nearness to be the only thing that mattered. I could feel her breath shift when she moved slightly, a subtle invitation or just habit, I couldn't tell. And I didn't care. Then she stepped closer, and the space between us vanished, and the world shrank to the faint scent of her perfume, the weight of her eyes, the quiet that existed only for us. The bridge creaked beneath her foot, and I realized how long I'd been holding my breath. A voice called from the far end of the bridge, harsh, abrupt, shattering the fragile cocoon around us. She flinched, her gaze snapping to the sound, and I caught my own heart in my throat, reluctant to let go of the warmth of her presence. She didn't step back. Her hand lingered near mine, fingers brushing as if unwilling to let go, and I realized, maybe too late, that I was already caught. The figure at the end of the bridge came closer, but she, my teacher, my impossible, radiant teacher, turned back to me, her eyes catching mine, and whispered, "I've been waiting for you." And just like that, the world fell silent again, except for the thrum of my heartbeat, and the question lingering between us, what happens next? The bridge had emptied again, leaving just the two of us, and the soft slap of water against the pilings. I wanted to ask her about all the years between us, but the words stuck like knots in my throat. I had seen her only in fragments over the last decade, school events, a passing smile, emails I never had the courage to send, and each encounter had been a quiet ache, a memory I carried without realizing. She adjusted her scarf, the motion slow, deliberate, and I caught the curve of her neck, the way her hair fell like a curtain across her shoulder. My hand itched to reach out, to tuck it back, but I stayed frozen, telling myself it was polite, it was safe. Yet nothing about this felt safe anymore. I started, faltering. My voice betrayed me, too loud in the silence. She didn't answer immediately, only tilted her head and waited, patient, knowing. I remembered the way she had always done that in class, letting a question hang in the air until I forced myself to finish it, until the answer came out jagged and honest. My last relationship ended badly. I confessed finally, more to myself than to her. I guess I've avoided being close to someone. Afraid of making the same mistakes. She let a quiet pause stretch between us, her gaze dropping to the boards beneath her feet. I know what it's like, she murmured, almost too soft to hear. Then she met my eyes, and something shifted in the way she looked at me, not judgment, not pity, just recognition. Recognition that held warmth and a quiet ache I couldn't place. I noticed her hand brush against mine as she adjusted her coat. It was a fraction of an inch of contact, yet it felt like the world had leaned closer just to witness it. My chest tightened, and I cursed myself for noticing, for letting it matter so much. She lingered near, a fraction too close, and I caught the faintest scent of her, something earthy, subtle, timeless. She cleared her throat, a small sound that made me acutely aware of my own breathing. You've changed, she said, a statement, not a question, but her eyes betrayed her curiosity. Not just physically, the way you hold yourself, the things you notice. You see more now. Her nearness was dangerous. I knew it. Not just because of the age gap, though it was there, nagging at me in the back of my mind, but because of the past we shared, the teacher who had once shaped me, the lines of authority and trust we were blurring now. And yet, every warning dissolved when she leaned slightly closer, letting her shoulder brush mine in the faintest way, like testing a boundary I wasn't sure I wanted defined. I'm still learning, I said, voice low, careful. I could feel her breath when she exhaled, a soft puff against my cheek. I wanted to close the distance entirely, wanted to feel the warmth of her hand, the curve of her arm, the weight of the years she carried. But I held back, afraid of breaking the spell, afraid of what acknowledgement might do to the fragile equilibrium between us. She smiled, small, fleeting, and I caught my own pulse in that gesture. It was not flirtation exactly, too nuanced, too human, but it ignited something I hadn't expected, a sense of possibility, of permission. That one little smile let me imagine that maybe she had been waiting for me in ways I hadn't understood until now. Her fingers brushed mine again as she shifted, deliberate enough that I couldn't convince myself it was accidental. It sent a shiver through me, one of those small shocks that make the hairs on your arms stand at attention. She didn't withdraw immediately, just let the moment linger. I caught her gaze, and she didn't look away. Instead, she offered a soft tilt of her head, an unspoken question, a bridge built in silence. I wanted to speak, to make sense of the tangle of desire and hesitation, but no words could capture it. Instead, I let my fingers graze hers, barely, and that tiny, nearly imperceptible contact seemed to confirm everything we weren't saying. The space between us felt charged, electric, impossible to ignore. And in that silence, in that near touch, I knew something was shifting. Something delicate, precarious, but entirely ours. The bridge creaked under our weight as if it were conspiring to reveal us. I had been leaning slightly closer, drawn to her in ways I didn't want to admit even to myself, when my phone buzzed in my pocket. I resisted the urge to pull it out, knowing a message from anyone could shatter the fragile bubble between us. She noticed the hesitation anyway. "Everything all right?" she asked, voice soft but sharp, cutting through my thoughts like sunlight through fog. "Yeah, just nothing," I stammered, tucking the phone back. My pulse quickened, but not just because of the interruption. Being near her, really near her, felt like balancing on the edge of a cliff. I caught the way her shoulder brushed mine when she shifted, the warmth radiating in a way that made it impossible to ignore. Every glance, every pause, every deliberate movement seemed designed to keep me tethered to her, even as part of me screamed that I shouldn't be here. She leaned slightly closer, and I could smell the faint perfume she always wore, soft, earthy, familiar. Her hand hovered near mine for a heartbeat, almost touching, almost asking permission. I wanted to close the gap, to finally let that tension resolve in a kiss, but the thought of crossing the line, of breaking whatever fragile sense of propriety we still had, stopped me. I started, voice catching, but she silenced me with a tilt of her head, eyes holding mine too long. Her lips parted slightly, as if she were going to speak, or maybe just breathe me in. A shadow flickered across the bridge, and my stomach dropped. A passer-by, or worse, someone who might know one of us, was coming closer. We froze, two bodies taut with awareness, our hands brushing in that delicate, fleeting way that made my chest ache. The figure passed without noticing us, but the surge of adrenaline didn't leave. Instead, it pulled us even closer together, a magnetic force neither of us could resist. Her hand brushed my forearm, not fully resting, not retreating, just enough to make my fingers tingle. I felt her breath against my neck as she spoke softly, almost a whisper. "We shouldn't, but I can't." Her words hung unfinished in the space between us, and my own tongue failed me in response. I wanted to lean into her, to close the space that had never felt more electric, but the memory of everything we weren't supposed to do, the age difference, the past, the risk of being seen, pressed down like a weight. And yet I couldn't pull away. She shifted closer again, hips nearly touching mine, the warmth radiating, teasing, daring me to surrender. My hand twitched, hovering near hers, and the bridge seemed to shrink until it existed only for the two of us. My heart hammered in my chest, short, erratic beats that echoed in my ears. "I shouldn't," I muttered, knowing I was lying to both her and myself. Her eyes softened, a mixture of longing and frustration, and she leaned just enough that I could feel her pulse against my arm. "I know," she whispered. "But neither of us is moving away, are we?" I exhaled slowly, caught in the gravity of her nearness. She didn't step back. Instead, she let our hands linger, fingers brushing in that tentative, charged way that made every nerve in my body wake up. The world narrowed to the space between us, to the tremor of her hand, the ghost of her lips so close I could almost taste the words she left unspoken. The bridge creaked again under our weight, a reminder of how delicate this moment was, but neither of us cared. We were pulled closer than ever, bodies almost touching, hearts racing, desire and fear mingling into something we couldn't name. And in that silence, suspended between longing and hesitation, I realized we were no longer just standing near each other. We were caught utterly, irrevocably. The evening air had cooled, carrying the faint scent of rain from upstream, and I could feel it, or maybe it was just her, settling heavy between us. My chest ached with every heartbeat, a rhythm that seemed too loud, too urgent. I'd been holding back, pretending to measure my steps, my words, my reactions, but the truth was unstoppable. I was on the verge of losing myself entirely. She stood so close that I could see the subtle tremor of her fingers, brushing against the railing like she wasn't sure what to do with them. My hand itched to reach out, to catch her wrist, to fold her into the space that had become ours, but I froze, caught between reason and desire. "You're driving me crazy," I confessed, voice low, almost a growl, more a surrender than accusation. The words hung between us, unpolished, desperate, and I watched her inhale sharply, lips parting. She started, then stopped, as if the confession itself startled her. She took a step closer, and the brush of her coat against mine made a current shoot up my arm. I could feel the warmth of her shoulder, the faint brush of her hair across my cheek, and it became impossible to tell where she ended and I began. "I can't pretend anymore," I admitted, leaning just slightly toward her. My words were a whisper, but the weight behind them pressed into her like gravity. "I shouldn't feel this way. I shouldn't." I stopped, the rational part of my brain pleading for restraint. But desire is never polite. Her hand lifted slowly, almost imperceptibly, brushing a strand of hair from my forehead, and it was the most intimate gesture I could imagine. Her touch lingered near my temple, fingertips grazing my skin with a feather-light intensity that left me trembling. I swallowed hard, aware of how impossibly close we were. "You don't have to fight it," she murmured, voice so low I could feel it vibrating against my ear. "I've felt it too, for so long." Her breath brushed my cheek, and the heat of it, the nearness of her, made my pulse surge. My knees felt weak, my thoughts scattered into the river below us. I wanted to close the last fraction of distance. I wanted to feel the curve of her lips, the subtle warmth of her breath on mine, the press of her hand against my chest. My fingers twitched near hers, desperate for contact, for something undeniable. She leaned closer too, and the faint scent of her, earthy, soft, intoxicating, overwhelmed everything. My heart hammered against my ribs, each beat echoing in my ears as if the world had shrunk down to the two of us, suspended on this bridge that suddenly felt like the only place that mattered. Then, why haven't we? I started, but her lips curved into a half-smile, one that carried both mischief and warning. She didn't answer. She didn't need to. The look in her eyes said everything she couldn't voice. She was just as caught, just as vulnerable, and just as terrified as I was. The space between us was a whisper, a single inch that felt infinite. Every second stretched unbearably long, every breath drawn with the knowledge that once we crossed this line, there would be no return. Then she tilted her head, and her lips were almost brushing mine. My pulse went wild. I closed my eyes for a heartbeat, leaning in, but the sound of footsteps, distant, but unmistakable, snapped through the tension, a cruel intrusion. She froze, and so did I, caught in the taut wire of desire and restraint. Her hand lingered on mine for the barest moment, and in that touch, that suspended heartbeat, I felt everything: longing, fear, guilt, obsession. And then she whispered, breathless, almost daring me, "Are you going to stop me, or let me?" The words hung like lightning in the night, and my lips hovered just above hers. The question, the challenge, the temptation, was unbearable. And for a moment, I didn't care about the world beyond this bridge. The footsteps hadn't belonged to a stranger. My stomach sank as the shadow rounded the far end of the bridge, and a voice cut through the charged air like ice. "Oh, I didn't expect to see you two here." We both froze. My chest tightened, the warmth of her hands suddenly too hot, the space between us unbearably exposed. She stepped back slightly, just enough that the brush of her coat against mine became a sting, a reminder that this, whatever it was between us, was no longer secret. "It's not what it looks like," I said, voice cracking. I wasn't sure if I was speaking to the intruder or to her, or maybe to myself. Her eyes narrowed, not in anger, but in that sharp, knowing way that made my knees go weak. She didn't step away fully. Instead, she let her hand hover near mine, trembling slightly, fingers brushing in a way that made every nerve in my body buzz with awareness. "I suppose nothing about tonight is safe," she murmured, almost to herself. Her breath hit my collarbone, and I shivered, not from cold, but from how close we still were, despite the sudden intrusion. The intruder's footsteps receded, leaving us in a fragile, suspended silence. My pulse thundered against my ribs, loud enough that I was sure she could hear it. She leaned slightly toward me, shoulder brushing mine, and the world narrowed to the tiny space where our bodies threatened to merge. "I didn't tell you something," she whispered, voice low, intimate, a confession I hadn't been ready for. My stomach twisted, my throat dry, because in the moment before her words, I hadn't known what fear or hope might come first. "What is it?" I breathed, voice trembling. My hand itched toward hers again, though I held it back, afraid of breaking the fragile line we were balancing on. She hesitated, then finally exhaled. "I've thought about this, about you, more than I probably should have. For years. Long after you left school, long after I told myself it was impossible." Her fingers brushed mine, lingering just long enough to make the world spin. The confession hit me harder than anything external could. My stomach knotted, my legs weak. The bridge seemed to sway beneath us, though I knew it hadn't moved. I was caught between wanting to collapse into her arms and recoiling from the risk. My voice faltered. I wanted to speak, to name the obsession, the desire, the impossibility, but the words failed me. Instead, my fingers twitched near hers, brushing against hers again, sending heat up my arm. My throat tightened at the intensity of her nearness. She leaned just a little closer, shoulder pressing softly against mine. Every micro-movement was deliberate, a step, a pause, a tilt of her head, a brush of hair against my cheek. It was dangerous, it was impossible, and it was magnetic. "I can't pretend anymore," I whispered, just loud enough for her to hear. My words hung between us, unpolished and raw, and she didn't step away. Instead, she let our hands rest near each other, the brush of her fingertips like sparks across dry paper. "You shouldn't," she said softly, almost warning me, almost daring me. Her lips curved into that smile I couldn't resist, the one that had undone me on the bridge years ago, and now again. My body ached with the weight of proximity, desire, and fear. Every nerve fired in silent protest, yet every instinct pulled me toward her. The air seemed to tighten, as though the world itself was holding its breath, waiting for the choice we had to make. "Then do we?" I asked, voice low, trembling. The question was dangerous, fragile, impossible. Her eyes met mine, shimmering in the twilight, and for the first time, I realized there was no going back. She didn't answer with words. Instead, she stepped closer, fingertips grazing mine once more, a touch electric and insistent, and whispered, "We have to." And in that moment, the bridge wasn't just a bridge anymore. It was a line we were about to cross together. The bridge swayed faintly beneath us, though either of us moved. Time seemed to slow, stretching each heartbeat into eternity. Her eyes held mine, wide and unflinching, and I felt the weight of everything, desire, fear, regret, longing, pressing down on my chest. I started, voice low, trembling. My words faltered under the gravity of the moment. "I don't know if we should." She stepped closer, closing the last fraction of space between us, her shoulder brushing mine in a warmth that made my knees feel weak. "Stop talking," she whispered, and the softness in her voice was sharp enough to cut through every doubt I had left. My hand rose slowly, almost unconsciously, and brushed the edge of her cheek. She leaned into the touch, and I caught the faint scent of her hair, earthy and soft, lingering in the twilight. Our breaths mingled in the space between us, shallow, uneven, every inhale tasting like the other. "I can't stay away," I admitted, voice dropping to a near whisper. "Not now. Not ever." My fingers itched to trace the line of her jaw, to anchor myself to her in ways I hadn't allowed before. She tilted her head toward me, eyes fluttering shut for just a moment, and exhaled softly, a sound that made the world narrow to the curve of her lips and the tremor in her hand. "Then don't," she said. "Don't fight it. Don't." Her words stopped, swallowed by the charged air, the pulse of tension we'd built over weeks, years, decades. I closed the distance, careful yet reckless, aware of every inch between our bodies. Her shoulder pressed more firmly against mine, our hands met, fingers tangling in a tentative, electric hold. It was messy, imperfect, human, either of us polished, either of us fully in control. "I've waited too long," she admitted, voice barely audible. Her forehead brushed mine, and for the first time, all the hesitation, the guilt, the societal rules faded, leaving only us. My heart pounded like it would burst, yet it felt strangely calm, anchored by the certainty in her eyes. I pressed closer, feeling the warmth of her against me, our breaths mingling, our hands holding on as though letting go might shatter everything. "I don't care what anyone thinks," I murmured. I faltered, then swallowed hard. "I just want you." She smiled, small and fierce, letting a laugh escape that was half disbelief, half relief. "I want you too," she admitted. Her voice trembled slightly, and I felt the weight of every moment we'd denied ourselves, every glance we'd stolen, every longing left unspoken. We stayed like that, pressed together, balancing on the precipice between fear and desire, letting the air around us thrum with unspoken promises. No words could capture the intensity, the ache, the strange sweetness of finally allowing ourselves to exist fully in each other's presence. Then she pulled back just slightly, enough to meet my eyes squarely. "Now we understand," she said softly, her thumb brushing my knuckles. "Everything. Each other. This us." I nodded, exhaling a shaky laugh that was equal parts relief and disbelief. "Yeah," I whispered. "We get it now. No running. No pretending." The tension that had held us taut for so long softened, replaced by the quiet intimacy of understanding. We still trembled slightly, hands brushing, shoulders touching, but the uncertainty had vanished. Whatever came next, we faced it together. For the first time, the bridge felt like ours, not a boundary, not a stage for hesitation, but a space for clarity, for surrender, for connection. And in that perfect, human, messy moment, I realized we finally understood each other completely. The night had settled over the bridge, soft and quiet, the world reduced to the gentle ripple of water below, and the rhythm of our own breathing. We didn't move immediately after that moment on the edge, the near kiss, the surrendered tension, but stayed pressed close, hands intertwined, letting the heat of each other's presence ease the lingering fear. I was so afraid, I admitted, voice low, almost lost in the hum of the river. Afraid of everything. What people might think, what I might lose, what I could ruin. She tightened her grip on my hand, thumb brushing across my knuckles, and smiled softly, that quiet, knowing smile that had undone me from the start. We can't control other people. We can only be here. Now. With each other. I leaned my forehead against hers, feeling the warmth of her skin, the soft exhale of her breath. The age gap, the past, the hesitation, all of it seemed to melt away in that contact. For once, nothing felt impossible. You make it easy, I whispered, fingers tangling in hers as I traced the lines of her hand. Being with you, it feels like coming home. She laughed softly, a sound that made my chest ache in the best way, and rested her head against my shoulder. I never thought I'd feel that again, she admitted. Her voice trembled just slightly, carrying years of longing, regret, and hope that had finally found its answer. We stayed like that for what felt like hours, leaning into the quiet intimacy of the night, letting our closeness speak the words we didn't need to say. Her hair brushed my cheek, her breath warmed my neck, and I could feel the slow, steady thrum of her pulse against mine. Every doubt I had carried for years had vanished, replaced by a simple truth: we were here, together, fully alive in the same moment. I don't care about anything else, I said finally, voice firm, steady. Nothing matters except this. You. Us. Her lips curved into that same faint, fierce smile, and she pressed a soft kiss to my temple, a whisper of contact, a promise, a seal. Then let's not think about anything else, she said. Just be here. With each other. Forever, if we can. I drew her closer, resting my chin atop her head, feeling the gentle rise and fall of her shoulders as she breathed. The world outside, the judgments, the risks, the lingering shadows of hesitation, felt impossibly far away. We had navigated fear, desire, and time itself, and arrived here, together, human, messy, and entirely real. For the first time in a long while, I felt unshakable calm, the kind that comes from knowing that someone sees you completely and chooses you anyway. Her hand squeezed mine gently, and I squeezed back, a silent agreement that we were finally, irrevocably aligned. The bridge faded into darkness around us, the river murmuring below, and we didn't need words. Our closeness, the warmth of skin against skin, the quiet laughter, and soft touches spoke louder than any declaration could. We had crossed the boundary of hesitation, fear, and propriety, and found something lasting, tender, and true. Finally, we pulled back just enough to look at each other properly, foreheads touching, breaths mingling. This is real, she whispered. Yes, I replied, voice steady, heart full. It's us. We lingered a moment longer, hands entwined, savoring the rare, perfect clarity of connection. Outside the bridge, the world waited, but here, in this suspended night, we had each other, and that was enough.